Two cops turn up the heat in a crazy case.
You guys are too much.
He's always like this.
Written and directed by Michael Polkneska, we are talking The Night of the Living Pumpkin. Polkneska also has a small role in the movie, and it looks like some of his family members may have had roles as well. Now, this is a next to zero budget, dare I say, almost homemade movie from Germany. So it is a schlocky, knowingly crappy, low budget B-movie horror comedy. So what's the story? It starts off with this kind of junkie who is looking for his next fix and ends up talking to this kind of robed figure that may well be some type of demon. Anyway, he buys some drugs, but these drugs are of course cursed and he has sold his soul without knowing it. So he takes these drugs, but because he's such a kind of mess, he ends up going for a pee in this pumpkin patch and all over this particular pumpkin, and then is killed there. The pumpkin is then sold, and because this guy has peed on it whilst kind of being under the influence of these demonic drugs, this pumpkin, and specifically the pumpkin seeds, are now kind of possessed with evil, and they end up getting into everything and possessing whatever they are into, be it beds, bread, a cat, all sorts of stuff. Along the way, we've got two kind of inept cops who are trying to kind of solve the murder. Effectively, we have kind of two storylines running concurrently until they kind of meet up at the end. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So again, this is a very, very low budget movie and a knowingly kind of like gonzo homemade style film. So if you want any type of production value, look elsewhere. Alright, what can we say that works in this movie's favour? Now, this is a film that leans in to its kind of low budget nature, almost like a Swede film, I think they're called. For example, and it's quite fun in some respects, they actually use like toys for some of the kind of the replacements for kind of humans when the gory stuff happens. For example, there's a character that is on a bed and this bed becomes possessed and kind of like collapses on her and kind of ends up chewing her out. And then they've literally like put a Barbie doll and then kind of like, you know, put sort of blood effects and stuff on this kind of Barbie doll. They've not even tried and hide the fact that it's like a doll. They just kind of lean into it. And another scene, for example, with a cat gets possessed with one of these kind of pumpkin seeds and ends up burrowing through a person, and it's literally like a plush cat, a soft toy. And again, there's no like, we'll try and make this look as realistic as possible. No, they just lean into it. So it has these kind of like knowingly silly B-movie effects, and it's quite fun because of it. There are also some more like legitimate kind of like funnier elements here. For example, our two cops go to this kind of spirit medium, and they're trying to kind of do a seance to communicate with the guy who was murdered, played by our director. And it's all kind of spooky, and then the kind of one of the cops like phone goes and kind of like it scares them and stuff. So there's a few kind of like jokes that are written to be funny, as well as these kind of like sillier kind of moments as well. I think some may enjoy, and I'll say some, but not all. Some may enjoy the kind of the silly sort of homemade VFX. It's it's kind of like people melting and things like that, but it's all done in a very like low budget sort of homemade fashion. No one's going to be grossed out by the kind of the gore effects. So it's all very obviously like rubber limbs and things like that. But you may have that element of fun to it. And I think there are some kind of fun story elements, like the whole process of this kind of pumpkin ultimately becoming kind of like infected with this kind of demonic force through urine, and this kind of junky peeing on it. It's a good delivery method. Let's just kind of put it like that. So there's some sort of silly low budget kind of fun to be had here. You know, and we have these kind of two concurrent storylines. A lot of the focus is on this kind of Halloween party, and it's just chaotic with all these kind of like little elements where something gets possessed, and they have almost like a little title card for it, like you know, Night of the Living Bed, for example, when the bed gets possessed and stuff like that. So the movie is effectively a series of gags, basically. And that's the thing that you can enjoy most about it, is this kind of series of low budget, kind of schlocky gags. But that's really it, to be honest with you. So again, you have to have a somewhat of a tolerance for B movies to really get anything out of this, because it is so low budget. Even I would say, like, people who enjoy low budget movies but have a certain, you know, criteria for what they like, this is probably not going to be for you. It is the real sort of Z grade, Plan 9 from Outer Space style kind of film. So only for them. So it's a very limited audience, I would say. I would say as well, I think there are scenes here. One of the things that may be more of a criticism, I think, is maybe going to be, everyone might agree on, is I think some scenes here just overstay their welcome, particularly in the kind of the Halloween party scene. You know, we have like these party goers who we don't really know anything about them. They're just going to turn up, and you know, they're just dancing and drinking, and the scene goes on seemingly forever. And the same thing with the kind of the spirit medium scene. It just goes on and on and on. So there's scenes here that I feel are just extended and expanded, because there's not much in regards to actual sort of story and stuff, to be honest with you. So how they get to a feature runtime is to extend these sort of sequences, to have like these long sequences that sort of run past their shelf life ultimately, and sort of where the joke is kind of past its sort of funny moment, and you kind of wish it had a little bit more. I mean, no one's watching this to kind of for a in-depth plot or character development and stuff like that, but I feel when you're having like a movie like this, it needs to be somewhat kind of like high energy and kind of punchy, and kind of moving on to the next gag pretty quickly. And there are elements of that, but at the same time, I think the you know, the movie just takes its time on certain things for a bit too long. And I think ultimately humour is very subjective. Even if you like this kind of lowbrow, silly, schlocky humour, I think a lot of the jokes will just kind of fall on, you know, deaf ears, to be honest with you. I should point out this is German language. I actually watched this in subtitles, but so I mean, I'm not really going to comment on the acting because no one's really taking anything seriously here. But it's kind of like you know, primarily focused, I guess, on these sort of two cops who are really the only sort of characters, and even them, I think one of them kind of gets sort of shortchanged. So it's really lacking any sort of type of characters, really. The people at the party have no real character moments, to be honest. It is so low budget, as I've mentioned. Again, it's worth pointing out that I just don't think many people would get much out of this. It's like it's one of these films where I think you can enjoy. You'd probably enjoy it if you watch clips of it, but as a film, it's clearly not meant to be very good, and it isn't particularly good as an actual film. If we're looking at it through a critical lens, you know, it's fairly shoddy, if we're being honest. And I think the joke could have been fun. It's one of these things where maybe this could have been more punchy had it been like a shorter than an anthology or something like that. Then you could appreciate the kind of like the kind of like the low budgetness. But as a feature, where it's kind of, you know, you've got to sit through an hour and a half of this, it's somewhat of a tough watch. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 10. I honestly don't think there's a huge amount of audience for this, to be brutally honest, outside of a very niche crowd who may get a kick out of the silly schlockiness. Would you see it? Have you seen it? Please let me know your thoughts, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.
I'll give you 2 big reasons to subscribe to Geek Legion of Doom.